Hello guys and welcome to the channel. My name is Excoundrel and today we're going to be doing a tier list for Wild Rift. This is a very basic initial tier list. If you'd like to join the Scoundrel gang for our Wild Rift adventures, there is a subscribe button down below, and thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. Guys, so this tier list, take it with a pinch of salt. Not everybody has access to all of the champions. We are not seeing all of the champions played to the level that we would assume them to be played, and a lot of the data that I've scraped has been purely from stalking high elo profiles and seeing what is being played in the high elo games right now. I want you to focus primarily on the S and A tier picks. Those are the ones that I'm seeing a lot of in Diamond Plus games on Wild Rift Japan server especially. These tier lists may not be 100% correct, and I fully expect this tier list to not be correct in 2 weeks' time. However, the S tier picks are absolutely the ones getting played and abused at the high level. So if you're looking for suggestions on one or two champions to focus on, the S tier picks, especially in each role, are the ones that are doing like very well in the very early meta of Wild Rift. But I am expecting the Wild Rift meta to change very rapidly, so I'm going to update this tier list every week. So I'll be doing a tier list release every week, probably on a Monday or Tuesday. I'll set a date for it, and we can see how those tier lists evolve over time. And kind of it's going to, I guess, get some judgment on about whether they are doing well or not. So we're going to go through mid lane, we're going to go through the Baron lane or the top lane, we're going to go through jungle, bot lane, AD carry, or dragon lane, AD carry, and support. And we're going to go through all of the individual picks and do a little bit of a discussion. I've put some random sample builds in, and I'm going to explain where those sample builds are relevant, but honestly it's very difficult to give some builds in a tier list, so take them with a pinch of salt. And again, if you're really wanting to find out what people are playing and what kind of builds they're playing, you can go to the leaderboard. You can have a look at the people who are in the high elo, look at their match history, and I would then recommend going into the individual match histories and see what people are playing, as well as the item builds that they're going, and you can kind of make your decisions from there. We're going to start in the mid lane, and we'll work our way through the lanes from here. So we're going to have a look at the mid lane, and again, I want to reiterate, these tier lists are primarily based on scouting in high elo games from the leaderboard, and they are not based in personal experience. I have not tested out all of these champions. I'm trying to use what data we have available in Wild Rift right now, and the data that I'm seeing, especially in high elo, is obviously going to be skewed, as not everybody's going to own all of the champions right now. So there are champions that are going to skyrocket over time, but I'm using the champions that we do have access to. And so right now, I see a lot of Orianna doing pretty well in high elo. There's some good win rates on the top tier players, or at least the highest ranked players in the ladder right now. And I'm seeing a lot of AP Gragas. AP Gragas is kind of like seemingly skyrocketing in popularity in both mid and top right now. And I've seen a lot of mid lane AP Gragas. So yeah, feel free to do with what you want. I think that Ahri, Akali, Zed, Twisted Fate, and Yasuo are all fine. I then think people like Fizz, Annie, Lux, Seraphine. I think Seraphine will likely go up, and I think Ziggs will likely go up once they are starting to be played a bit more, especially Ziggs, as he's so good at taking towers. But I think those in B tier right now they're playable. You can get wins on them, but I just think the ones in A tier and S tier are just the ones that are kind of dominating the meta right now and kind of the strongest. Especially if you're a good Yasuo player, like I've seen some really good Yasuo players absolutely dominate. The only mage that I think is in a pretty of a rough position right now, the same reason he is in League of Legends, really, in the traditional game, is Aurelion Sol. His damage application and his kind of ability to deal useful damage is quite difficult to apply in a lot of situations. So I think Aurelion Sol can get wins, but you've got to roam like a madman. You've got to just be all over the map as Aurelion Sol, otherwise you're just going to be pretty much useless compared to most of the other mid lane mages. And I've just created a basic mage build for you guys to use if you so choose. This is not going to be useful on things like Yasuo or Akali, but you know, you can use this on things like Lux, you can use it on Ziggs. Annie is okay with it. It works on Ahri, it works on Orianna. And these are just some items that are obviously just going to be very good for a very standard mage build. Ludens into Soul Stealer now, or Awakened Soul Stealer. I just want to let you know that Awakened Soul Stealer is, I think, an absolutely insane item. You get 65 ability power, 200 max mana, 20% cooldown reduction, and you can get an extra 15% cooldown reduction after you get a unique takedown. So it's like that item is absolutely broken. I like Zhonya's personally as most mages, but you might want to consider the Hextech GLP belt, which allows you to dash a short distance, both of which are fine. And then a classic combo of Rabadon's Death Cap and Void Staff. That last item can be very much up to you, depending on what you think is most applicable to the situation. Things like Morellonomicon for grievous wounds. You can use Leandri's Torment for the longer fights. You can use Lichbane if you are basic attacking quite a lot, like for instance Gragas quite clearly would like a Lichbane in this build. So that last item completely up to you depending on the situation, but this is just a very basic mage build that works for a lot of people. You use the cooldown boots as well. That will get you 40% cooldown reduction across the board, which is going to make you have your abilities up more often than not. Obviously this does not apply for the AD mid laners and some of the assassins like Akali who use hybrid damage. It's just a basic mage build that will help you get to grips with the likes of, Ahri. It works for Orianna, it works for Annie, it works for Lux, etc. So this is just my basic mid lane tier list. Definitely seeing a lot of Orianna and Gragas in the top tier elos right now. Okay, moving on. We're in the top lane, or the Baron lane as it's known in Wild Rift. I'll have to get over calling it top lane eventually. So, the top lane or the Baron lane is, I think, a very, very diverse lane that can house a number of champions, of which a lot of them have not yet been tested. I would say that, honestly, most of these are very unlikely to have been tested in the current meta, but what I've seen dominate for the most part is Olaf, Garen, Camille, and Malphite. They've been very, very, very common from the sort of the higher elo games that I've seen, especially Olaf top lane with the Triforce build. I've put a couple of Bruiser item builds that you can see down below. These builds will not apply to everybody. Not everybody can use Triforce correctly. But for instance, the Triforce Sterak's one is a perfectly fine 1-2 item combo for Olaf. The Black Cleaver Sterak's combo is a perfectly good 1-2 item combo for Garen. Again, it is too difficult to create a catch-all build for this entire lot of champions. But outside of the likes of Olaf, Garen, and Camille, who I think are very, very strong in the top lane right now, Akali, she's pretty good. She's actually pretty decent into melee matchups, and that's why I think Akali's a pretty solid top lane now. She just can't roam as much, and that does limit her snowball potential. Gragas AP, I just think Gragas AP looks to be really busted right now, so I'm just keeping my eyes on Gragas. I think he's probably in a strong spot. Nasus, he can stack and scale very easily, but is quite easily kited in the current meta. But however, we do have boots in the meta, which means that Nasus can get pretty significant speed boosts. It's like running Ghost without actually having Ghost. So Nasus has extra ways of getting on top of his targets and landing a very big heavy hitting siphoning strike, which is why I think actually he's pretty solid. I think Fiora's good. Other than that, you're kind of scraping the barrel. Tryndamere is not in a great spot right now, for the same reason as Master Yi isn't in a very good spot right now. They just take a little bit too long in the top lane, and they're very easily abusable in the early game. So they're a little bit difficult. And plus, we don't have very long games, and split pushing win conditions are not as easy to achieve because of the low respawn timers in this game towards the early game. And that's why, split pushes themselves are not massively impactful right now in Wild Rift. Plus the fact that Nexus has a defense ability. It makes it much harder to just straight up backdoor. Singed is pretty decent. He's quite annoying to deal with, good at clearing waves, good at wave manipulation. Xin Zhao Vi, I've seen them play top lane if they're not played inside the jungle. Xin Zhao is still very good pretty much across the map. Jarvan, I've seen a little bit of top lane. Mundo, unfortunately, not in a great spot, and I think Yasuo is probably better served in mid lane where he has the ability to roam. I think Yasuo loses a lot of other melee matchups, unfortunately. So if you put Yasuo against a Bruiser, it's very unlikely that he's going to come out on top. But if you want to do well in top lane, definitely focus on the likes of Garen. He's very easy to play. And sort of will always be able to execute at least one person. Very, very strong 1v1. Olaf appears to be pretty strong in the meta right now. Camille seems very good. Malphite is a great engager, and I've seen a lot of people playing Malphite in the current meta. I also like the likes of Jax. He's always pretty strong. So I think this is my current tier list for the Baron lane, although of course this is purely based on just looking at high-elo games right now. Once we get more data over the course of the next few weeks, it'll be much easier to assess tier lists, but these are just very initial tier lists based on a bit of guesswork and kind of what I know from traditional League as well. Okay, let's take a look at AD carries now that go in the Dragon lane, usually alongside the support. And there's a very clear winner in the AD carry category, and that is Ezreal. Ezreal is in every single high elo game now. I cannot name a game where I have kind of viewed the match history and there has not been an Ezreal. Ezreal is busted. The build that you see at the bottom, the Manamune into Triforce, into Blade of the Ruin King with Quicksilver Sash, it's a pretty common Ezreal build. You can add then Last Whisper or it's a Mortal Reminder plus whatever else you like following that. But that 3-item combo of Manamune, Triforce, and Blade of the Ruin King is pretty common for Ezreal, as it is on the PC. You could also replace the Triforce with an Iceborne Gauntlet if you are needing to kite more often in fights. But Ezreal is busted, and the reason he's busted is the auto-aim skill shot ability. If you portrait lock someone in a fight and you cast your Mystic Shot as well as your Flux, or whatever it is, the skill that shoots the giant orb out, that sort of empowers your next Mystic Shot or basic attack if you land it on the same champion, they are busted. They are really, really, really busted. Ezreal is just very strong right now, and unarguably is the strongest AD carry in the meta. However, there are other good AD carries that can work with a variety of build paths. I've included a very basic, traditional critical strike build path. You'll notice it's kind of like the default one. Infinity Edge into 3 other crit items. Now, you don't need to build Static Shiv, but I would definitely recommend Rapid Fire Cannon. And you could also then sub out something for Runan's Hurricane, which also has critical strike in there. But definitely look for 4 critical strike items. It gives you 100% critical strike, and you can add a Last Whisper in, or a defensive item like a Bloodthirster, or a Death Dance, or whatever you like towards the end. In terms of the rest of the AD carries, Ashe, very, very powerful, very popular right now, as is Jhin and Jinx, and I've seen quite a bit of Kai'Sa, although I would say I've seen her a little bit less than the likes of Ashe and Jhin in high elo. And then down the roster a little bit are Misfortune, Vayne, and Varus. Now, unfortunately, Varus, I think, falls off compared to a lot of the AD carries in the meta and the ones that are available. Misfortune, I just think, is a little bit too short range, and again, another caster AD carry, and caster AD carries are a little bit down the wayside unless you're Ezreal, where everything just hits like a truck. And Vayne takes a little too long to scale, and isn't particularly resilient against burst damage, although I have seen some very good Vayne performances in Wild Rift. The reason there are no AD carries below B tier is AD carry is just the strongest role in the game right now. So any of these AD carries on the list, you will be able to carry a game with if you play them correctly. But Ezreal just is the most busted of the lot. Okay, moving on to supports. And just like in the AD carry roles, there is one support that is essentially dominating, and that is Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank has got a lot of really good item builds, and the build that I'm showing you below is a build that I've seen a fair amount of. Iceborne Gauntlet on Blitzcrank is pretty solid, plus the Zeke's Convergence is really solid too, and I actually like Winter's approach. Mainly because it's going to give Blitzcrank a load of armor, and it synergizes really well with his Iceborne Gauntlet as well too. And then I also quite like Protector's Vow alongside Blitzcrank, especially if you're pulling someone towards your team. It just increases the resistances. But Blitzcrank is by far and away the most powerful support, or the most common support in the meta right now, especially at the higher elos. Alongside that, supports that apply CC in general. So Alistar is very, very strong right now, and usually is picked in games where Blitzcrank is as well. We're seeing a lot of Janna, I think mainly because Janna is just available. You get her for free at level 10, I believe, so a lot of people are playing Janna. But I've seen a lot of Nami. I think Nami is incredibly strong when paired with the right AD carry, especially something like Ashe. I'm seeing a bit of Braum as well. Seraphine I'm putting in A tier because I think she's got the potential to be a strong support. We're just not seeing a lot of her played. The supports that are kind of weak in the meta right now are those that are generally, traditionally weak to Blitzcrank. Lux, Sona, Soraka, and Annie's support just isn't too strong in Wild Rift, unfortunately. Not at the current time, anyway. But definitely like Soraka, Lux, and Sona, they're all weak to Blitzcrank. And so anything that is weak to Blitzcrank, because Blitzcrank is so common in the meta, is generally going to be a little bit weaker in the meta. And Soraka just seems very underwhelming in the current state of the game. But Blitzcrank is almost certainly the strongest support. So if you're looking for a support to play, especially one that you have access to early on, I would definitely recommend Blitzcrank. He is very, very good state right now. But if you can get hold of Alistar, he is also a good support to have. He requires a little bit more all-in, a little bit more sort of combo ability than Blitzcrank, but you know, Alistar is still a strong answer to Blitzcrank, as well as Braum, also pretty strong too. But for the most part, if you're looking for a good support, it's going to be Blitzcrank. Okay, and in the jungle, and again, there are a couple of junglers that are completely dominating right now, and you're kind of getting the idea that the junglers that I'm using for the intro are the ones that end up being an S tier, or the champions that I end up using for the intros are the ones that end up being an S tier, but the junglers that are dominating right now generally tend to be Xin Zhao and Lee Sin. We are seeing a lot of Xin Zhao, Lee Sin in most of the higher elo games that are currently taking place on the Japan server, at least, and then beyond that, it's kind of a bit like personal preference. I've seen some Olaf jungle do well. I've seen Gragas do well from the jungle. I've seen quite a bit of Shyvana and Vi. For low elo games especially, Master Yi is an absolute pub stomper. If you can get Master Yi to about 3 or 4 items, he's just going to absolutely crush. I really love Graves, But honestly, I don't think Graves is ridiculously strong right now. Like, I really wanted to love Graves. I've played quite a lot of him, but I just don't think he's super strong in the meta. Other than that, Jarvan, Camille, and Jax can all be played in the jungle. Unfortunately for the AP junglers, they're just not that good. Amumu and Evelynn are not super strong. Evelynn can snowball really hard though, so if you play Evelynn well and you get a lot of kills in the early game, she can snowball incredibly well. Mundo and Garen can be played in the jungle. I've actually played with a bit of Garen jungle and he is strong. And then there is Malphite, who can also jungle but isn't particularly strong. But if you really want to focus on doing well, especially if you are playing from outside of the Southeast Asian region, Xin Zhao's pretty strong because he's a lot of basic attack focused. Lee Sin, I would not recommend if your ping is 200. He's a bit too hard to play. But if you're in Southeast Asia or playing on the servers, and you're local to the area, Lee Sin can be very good with with good ping, basically. Other than that, again, Olaf, Gragas, Shyvana, Vi, and Master Yi all pretty good too. It really depends, but nothing comes close to Xin Zhao and Lee right now. Both of them are just incredibly strong when played in the right hands. So this is the end of the tier list. It's a very, very basic initial tier list. I hope you guys don't mind. Obviously, I've made some assumptions here. We're doing a lot of, prediction. But not all the champions have been unlocked for everybody. There's a more limited champion pool than the entire champion pool would suggest. And I think over the next 2 weeks, once people start to unlock more champions, we'll see some a more diverse meta open up. But this is just, especially for the most part, like I said earlier, focus on the S and A tier picks, because those are the ones that you are generally seeing much more of in high elo. If you've enjoyed the content, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.